So we're doing the Hayom Yom from the 22nd of Cheshvan. So Avram says, the quality of Chesed says to Hashem, since you created Avram, I'm kind of out of a job. Because Avraham, a soul clothed in a body, occupying himself with real deeds, real actions like hospitality to strangers as a means of disseminating the idea of God in this lowly world. In other words, spreading godliness with actual tangible actions is actually on a higher plane and a higher level than the very midah, the very attribute of kindness itself. In other words, the abstract kindness in the heavens, that's a part of, in a way, God's kindness, that isn't even as great as the kindness of a person down here on earth actually doing helpful things for other people, like Avraham having guests on Shabbos. It's actually higher than the attribute of kindness, or even higher than atzilut. So a simple deed on this in this world is higher than these high realms. The complaint, said the attribute of Chesed before the Holy One, is an expression of envy of Avram's service by the attribute of kindness of Atzilus. So in other words, if you think, and a lot of people think about this, they think this life is, we just got to get through this life, and then we go on to our reward, and we go on to live in the world to come, and this is just, we got to just get through it. Well, actually, there aren't opportunities in all of the higher worlds that can compare to the opportunity of a simple act of kindness done in this world, or a mitzvah of bringing soup to a sick person, or any other tangible mitzvah of putting a mezuzah up on your door, washing your hands, natilas yadayim, lighting Shabbos candles on time, little things, all these abstract, beautiful Hasidic descriptions of what happens in the higher realms, all that not as impressive as a good deed done by Avraham or any of us inspired by Avraham in the lower world. So I thought that was a very cool teaching. That was the Hayom Yom for today. And any comments on that? Comments, queries, quips, exclamation marks, squeaks, laughs? Okay, well, I got a chuckle out of Linda, so that's good. Okay, then now we're moving on. So then that was the Hayom Yom for the day that just finished. And now the Hayom Yom for the 23rd of Cheshvan, which is tonight and tomorrow. And I think this is also very instructive, so I'm going to read it. And it's very famous story in Lubavitch history. The kids learn about this all the time. So the Tzemach Tzedek, as many of the Rebbes in the lineage of the Chabad Rebbes, there were 7 Chabad Rebbes. And because they used to get involved in politics in Russia, they were quite rebellious to a lot of the decrees of the government, and they were always trying to make sure that Judaism wouldn't be lost, and they were basically non-compliant to a lot of what was going on in the world at that time. For example, if the Russian government said, all children have to go to school on Shabbat, so the Lubavitch Rebbes would try and intervene and make that not be a law and fight it. And so they were often getting into trouble. So many of them got arrested. So there are many stories of Lubavitch Rebbes being arrested. Okay, so that's the background. The Tzemach Tzedek was arrested. Can anyone guess how many times? Well, just during the rabbinical conference in St. Petersburg in 1843, and I talk about civil disobedience, he was arrested 22 times. Just during this conference, maybe it was a month long, I don't know. Why? Because he was opposing the demands of the government, regarding changes in education, which is a battle going on now. Like yeshivas have to teach sex education and gender education and all this kind of nonsense. So he was rebelling against that, saying that the government has no right to dictate what we learn in our schools. He got arrested 22 times. The minister in charge confronted him. Is this not rebellion against the government? In other words, don't you have, first of all, you're rebelling against the government, and don't you have laws about that? So the Tzemach Tzedek answered, a rebel against the government is liable to be punished by death of the body, but a rebel against the kingdom of heaven is punishable by death of the soul. Now tell me which one is worse. So that's one quote. There's another quote of the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was also, it was a different story in a different time. The Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested, and he was in St. Petersburg. Somebody's here with the phone, so welcome. I'm not sure who they are, but welcome. So the Frierdiker Rebbe was told, somebody was pointing a gun, and he said to this person pointing a gun, and they said, aren't you nervous? And he said, well, oh, Shoshana, welcome. So the person, the Frierdiker Rebbe said, he's pointing a gun. If I was a person who had two gods and one world, I would be nervous. But I'm a person who has one God and two worlds. I'm not nervous of this gun. That's the famous, in other words, I have this world and the world to come. So I'm not intimidated by you pointing a gun at me. So anyway, so I thought that was interesting to read about the Tzemach Tzedek arrested 22 times for opposing the changes that the Russian government was trying to make to education at that time, and just like fighting against government demands for our education is not a new thing. Anyway, so that's just the warm-up. I'm happy that Shoshana's on the line. Welcome, welcome. And so now we're going to continue and move into, oh, anybody want to say anything about the civil disobedience piece that I just read about? If I had two gods and one world, I would be afraid, but I have two worlds and one God, so I'm not afraid. Or, you know, disobeying the government has certain punishments, but disobeying Hashem, that's, you know, way more significant. So I thought those were empowering quotes. Okay, so any comments on that? And then if not, we will continue. Okay, so we're coming, this is a great parsha because it's dealing with a lot of personalities and stories of human beings in ways that we can relate to. And while we especially this book of Bereshis, Genesis, we know that we're getting introduced to all the forefathers and the foremothers. Actually, we kept having this joke on the weekend. It's three fathers, but we call them the forefathers because they came before, but they're three of them, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And the four mothers, well, actually, there are four of them: Sarah, Rivka, Rochel, and Leah. So now we're in the storyline that in last week's Parsha, we have the commandment that Avram was given to go sacrifice his son. And he actually went along with this commandment, and he and his son went and they climbed Mount Moriah, and they went up the mountain, and they were just about to, Abraham raised his hand. And then, as we said, and as you must maybe have learned many times, Hashem said, don't do it. I was just testing you. So even in those days, they had false news, and the news reports were falsifying information. And according to fake news, yeah. So according to our information, what happened is Sarah was told by the Satan that Abraham had taken Yitzchak up to be offered as a sacrifice, and somehow being told this information, she had a heart attack and she died. I don't know, it doesn't say she had a heart attack, but she died. So I'm guessing it was a heart attack. Now, there's some conversation in the Meforshim, did she die having a heart attack because Avraham, in the end, didn't sacrifice Yitzchak, and maybe she was nervous that he wasn't fitting to be a korban. There are such opinions. Or she was shocked that Avraham even went along with such a plan and didn't tell her, or just the idea of it was so shocking to her. But we know that hearing this news and being presented by hearing it in a way that kind of, there was aspects of it that were certainly false news, in that they were designed to shock her and make her feel very uncomfortable. If she would have been told, your son's fine, your husband's fine, everything is good, they're coming back home for lunch, they'll be home in 2.5 hours, and then, by the way, your husband and son went through this big test, but everyone's okay, she probably wouldn't have died. But in the way she was told, the way she found out, she died. So now we start in this week's Parsha, and Avraham is actually buying a plot of land to bury her. And it tells us that she lived for 127 years. And the Meforshim go through a lot of effort telling us that at 100, she was like 20 years old with regard to sin. So she was as innocent at 100, or we can even say as undamaged, as uncynical, as what are the other damages of sin? We get distant from God, we get cynical, we get wounded, we have a lot of that stuff going on. So at 100, she was as pure as she was at 20, and at 20, she was like a 7-year-old with regard to beauty. So a kind of a beauty of a very innocent young child. So she had that at 20, really pure and youthful and kind of innocent in a different kind of way. And then when she was 100, she was like 20. So this is kind of talking about this beautiful quality of Sarah, that she had this youthfulness and this capacity to be fruitful even in her old age and all of that. So we have this whole story of Avraham negotiating and buying the land of Ma'arat HaMachpelah, which is where Sarah is buried. And not only is Sarah buried there, and we know Avram and Sarah are buried there, then Yitzchak and Rivka are buried there, and Yaakov and Leah are buried there. So it was a very significant purchase of land in Hebron. So this is the Shabbos, where 5,000 people are in Hebron for Shabbos. And my son is turning 19, so the year he was just about to be bar mitzvah, I went on a trip with him to Eretz Yisrael, and we were in Hebron for the Shabbos, Parshas Chaya Sarah. He actually got an aliyah in the davening of that davening for that Shabbos, which was amazing. And so 5,000 people go to spend Shabbos in Hebron on the Shabbos, because this is written in the Torah how Avraham actually purchases that land, 400 pieces of silver. And in the Psukim, they talk about how the negotiations of the field and all of that. And it's very interesting and beautiful. It's not the part that I want to focus on, though. The part that I want to focus on is then there's that buying of that burial place for Sarah. And he gets it, and he buries and he eulogizes Sarah over there. But then he decides that his son Yitzchak wasn't in fact offered as a sacrifice, and he's 37 years old. And what must he do now? What do all good parents do for their kids that are getting on in age? single, it's time to do what, Linda? What does he need to do with Yitzchak?
Hook him up with a wife.
Got to get married. He's got to
Yeah.
find him a wife. Time for a shidduch. So it says he's old and well on in years, and it says Hashem had blessed Avram with everything. He blessed him with everything. And it's interesting, what did he bless him with? So it could be that he blessed him with a son. It could be that he blessed him with the daughter as well. Or it could be that he blessed him, says the Midrash, that he doesn't test him anymore. He had 10 tests, and all of the tests were very difficult and made him have to leave. And he leaves his home and he goes where he doesn't know where he's going to be led. And then he has to go into Egypt, and then he has to send out Hagar, and then he has to send out Hagar again with Ishmael. And his life hasn't been so easy. So one of the interpretations of Hashem finally blessing him is that he can sort of relax, and his life gets a little easier. So that's okay. So now that his life is a little easier, he thinks about this shidduch. So he says to his slave, oh, there's Susan coming in.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hello, Susan.
Welcome, Susan. Okay. So so he says to his slave Eliezer, and it's kind of hard for us to read that idea that I mean, the truth is that in all ancient cultures there were slaves. In all across the whole world, across Africa and everywhere there were slaves. The difference about America, hi Susan, nice to see you. The difference about America is that they actually had a whole civil rights movement and stopped slavery. But the way that the radicals left talking about Americans having slaves, every country had slaves. It was kind of slaves all around. And in Torah, there were very strict rules about how to treat your slaves. If you had one pillow, you needed to give it to your slave, in fact, not to you. If you're going to eat a meal, you needed to feed your slave first before you. And it also says that Eliezer was cursed because he was the son of Canaan, who was the son of Ham. And he basically knew he was going to be a servant somewhere. And he was much happier being a slave, actually, to Avram than to anyone else. But anyway, Abraham says to his slave, the elder of his household, who controlled all of his assets, place your hand under my thigh and swear to me by the God of heavens and the God of earth that you're not going to take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. Rather, to my land and to my kindred you shall go and take a wife for my son Yitzchak. This is interesting because Abraham told him to leave Canaan and to leave, to leave where he was and to come to Canaan and to live where he is, but because supposedly that was a better place to be. But now when it's time for him to get a shidduch, he's sending Eliezer back to where he comes from. So the Midrash actually says that sometimes when you're looking for a shidduch, it's better to go with families that you know and to go with families that are similar to where you come from. And if you're in a new place and externally everyone looks kind of impressive, you don't really know them so well, go and look for a shidduch from what you know. And it's an interesting thing that the Midrash actually spoke about that. Let me see if I can. Anyway, so he sends him to go back to his hometown. And yeah, okay. So then he says, and Eliezer says to him, what happens if the woman doesn't want to follow me back to this land? Should I then come back and get your son and take him back to the land that you left before? And Avram says, forget that, never. That's one thing that absolutely mustn't happen. Like even if you don't find the right girl, you come back empty-handed, do not think about taking my son back to where we came from. And then he says, Hashem, God of the heavens, who took me from the house of my father and from the land of my birth, and who spoke concerning me, and who swore to me, saying, to your offspring will I give this land. So it's not just about the family and Hashem wanting Abraham and his descendants to be blessed, but it's about the land of Israel. So about this land. And then anyone who was on the retreat, it's very interesting. He says, I will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. Sorry, he will send his angel. This is kind of interesting. Which angel is he going to send? And which angel? So let's see. Later, I just want to see if it talks about, because I was using the Midrash, and let me just go to the beginning, where, yeah. So we have, right, okay, and I will send his angel. Okay, Reb Dossa said this refers to a specific angel. What's the specific angel? So the Midrash does not identify the angel, but the Eitz Yosef cites the Shalah, who writes that it was the archangel Metatron, and the Maharzu identifies the angel as Michael. So here, it's interesting. Abraham is saying that I'm sending you on a journey, but Hashem will accompany you. How is he going to accompany you? He's going to accompany you in the form of an angel. And some of our holy teachers who function with heightened consciousness, we call it Ruach HaKodesh, they even can have information, can connect information that they could even identify which angel. One says Michael and the other one says Metatron. Okay, so Hashem will send his angel, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman will not wish to follow you, you shall be absolved of the oath, and then that's fine, but just don't let my son get hooked into going back with you there. I don't send home pictures and postcards saying, I wish you were here. It's a great place, beautiful girls, come and check out the scene. Don't do that. So the slave placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master. And the reason he did that is Abraham had a bris, and there's a custom to put your hand on a sign of a mitzvah, and swore to him regarding this matter. Then the slave took 10 camels of his master's camels, and went with all the bounty of his master in his hand, in other words, with the document. And he arose and went to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor. And the reason, there's so many things about the story that are so instructive that I want you to pay attention to. First of all, we all want to know, is Hashem with us when we go and do different things? We have a mission, a project, we're going shopping at Evergreen, well, whatever it is that we're doing. How do we know if Hashem is with us in what we're doing or not? Anyone have an idea? Let's say you're going to do something challenging or difficult, or just let's say you're going to do anything at all.
So I'll give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why I'm late is because I was on the phone with a parent, and they were tortured with making a decision. And she's a very high neshama person. And I said, your body knows the answer. There's energy in both answers. If you put your hand on your heart, you ask Hashem to answer. So I believe it's always 100% of the time accessible. It's just whether we're able to connect with that energy and power.
Okay, that's Susan, right? Talking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, if you at a crossroads and then you kind of tune in, you'll be guided to go left or to go right.
Sort of, but how about like an analogy someone gave me? And I think you said something like this on the weekend. infinity is a hard concept, but the vastness of oceans gives you the feeling of infinity. And the question is, how big is your cup? So it's really, how big is your cup, and do you even have a cup? Are you using your cup? Is that it's always there. It's just whether we tap into it and how much.
Okay. Okay, cool. Anyone have another response to how do you, if you're going on a journey or you have a mission, how would you kind of sense the presence of Hashem being with you, or your way being blessed, or what would be some signs? Well, for example, let's say you're coming into Evergreen. Well, actually, I don't like Evergreens as much as Rockland Kosher. Let's say you're coming into Rockland Kosher and the parking lot is chock-a-block full. It's Friday morning, or it's Thursday afternoon when it's even fuller. And as you're coming in, just as you're coming into this crowded parking ground, someone leaves, makes a space for you, and Baruch Hashem, you have a nice parking ground right near the front entrance. Hashem was kind to me. All right, those, for me, that's always like, Baruch Hashem, a little wink, a little smile, a little wave, a little, okay. So let's see what's going to be with Eliezer in this whole process, because what's going to be with Eliezer in this process, and how does he relate? I mean, Hashem basically said, Avram says, go to my old place that I lived, and basically, you know, he's got the whole of Transjordan area to look at, you know, and find me a wife for my son, and don't, you know, preferably try not to come back empty-handed, and really she should be from my family as well. Okay, so he comes to the outskirts of the city and he makes the camels kneel, when it says he came to the outskirts of the city, it actually tells us, where does it tell us? Right. He took 10 camels, and he had a note, and he comes, here. He comes to Aram Naharaim, and it says he arose and he went to Aram Naharaim. And the way that the Torah puts that whole lot of information into one sentence, he got up, he went, and he's there already. You'd think the place is right next door. You'd think it's kind of going from, I don't know, from my house to, you know, 5 houses down, or walking to maybe the center of Monsey, just like this. Actually, it's supposed to be a 3-day journey. And it says that what Hashem did is he contracted the way for him, which is called, what's it called? It's called Kafitzat Haderech. And just because I was learning from the Midrash, it's kind of cool to see who else did Hashem do this Kafitzat Haderech thing. Because it's, what it means really is Hashem, it means that the person doing the deed actually was functioning in quantum time. And what does it mean, quantum time? Like, what does it mean, quantum time? Can anybody answer me? What does it mean, quantum time? Let's say you've got regular time, and then you've got kind of...
Is it kind of timeless?
We're breaking out of the boundaries of time. We're breaking.
Right. How do you explain
In
it?
the non-quantum world, you have space and time, and they operate in very definitive rules. When you start getting into quantum time, which is sort of, in my construct, kind of messianic time, miraculous time, new world time, world to come time, time and space doesn't have the same rules. And sometimes there's certain people in our history, and it's mentioned actually 4 times, when this shortening of space happened. And it's just cool to know what those times were. So it's Abraham when he went to fight in the war to rescue Lot. We spoke about that. There was the civil war between the 5 kings and the 4 kings. It says Hashem did this kafitzat haderech. He kind of left and he was there right away. He was operating in quantum time. And then when Yaakov left Beersheba and he went to Haran after, his mother intervened with his father giving the birthright, and his father was a little bit blind. And instead of giving the birthright to Esav, he gives it to Yaakov. And then Esav comes and sees he was sort of cheated, for want of a better word, out of the birthright that he thought was going to be his. Well, he thinks he was cheated. Actually, he sold it to his brother for a bowl of lentil soup a while back. But when Yaakov, running literally to save his life, because Esav wants to kill him, it says that he went to Beersheba, from Beersheba to Haran, and it says the land kind of, he traveled in quantum time. And then when David is going to fight Goliath, and there's a whole thing with the fighting, and someone jumps and saves David, and there's a whole story there. There's also like a kafitzas haderech. But anyway, that's kind of interesting. So he's already in a kind of a little bit of a miraculous state. So he comes to Aram Naharaim, to the city of Nahor, and the camels kneel outside the city at a well of water at evening time, at the time when the woman who drew water come out. Now, in our Torah, we have a lot of stories that happen at a well, and we have a lot of shidduchim that get made at a well. And we've often talked about that water is a sign of what? Water is a sign of what?
Blessing.
Blessing. What else?
Mercy.
What we've said this.
Life.
No, life.
Life. Blessing. Yes. What else?
I'm at work. I have to do my work.
So
that's not the right
abundance.
answer?
Torah,
Rebellion.
Torah,
Rebellion.
knowledge. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that happen in our history with people meeting. Moshe Rabbeinu meets his wife at a well, Tzipporah, and Yaakov meets Rachel at a well. And here Eliezer comes to a well. So there's a lot of interesting things about that. But he comes to the well at evening time, at the time when the woman who draw water come out. Now, what does he do? He says, Hashem, God of my master Abraham, may you so arrange it for me this day and do kindness with my master Abraham. See, I stand here by the spring of water, and the daughters of the townsmen come out to draw water. And then he says, let it be that the maiden to whom I shall say, please tip your jug so I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will even water your camels, her will you have chosen for your servant for Isaac, and may I know through her that you have done kindness with my master. So in other words, Eliezer is saying, I'm coming and I'm davening to you, God, that you should make it happen, that I'm going to recognize the right girl, because she's going to say this, and I'm going to say this, and she's going to say that, and that's what it's going to be. So do you think that's a good thing that he said? And I didn't put the text on. I hope it's not so hard for you to, do you want me to put the text on the screen, or it's fine for you to listen? I can put the text on the screen if you want. Is it easier? Yes, no?
It's okay.
It's okay.
Good to listen.
So he says, let it be that the young lady to whom I shall say, tip your jug so I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will water your camels. That's the girl. Is that a good thing that he's putting the whole of Jewish history on if I say this and that happens, I found the right girl. Is that good or is that bad?
I have a long history with battling this from those early days, early Balchuva days, where it was signs, signs, signs. And I consistently hear from rabbis now, don't listen to signs. Big Hasidic rabbis, don't listen to signs. So like, it's a personal battle I've experienced over decades.
So thank you for that. It's a little complicated because on the one hand, it says when choosing a wife, okay, hang on, I want to see, Karina likes to send answers in little things. Okay, it's a little bit different thing. Well, Karina's saying that on the one hand, you can test God. It says give tzedakah and test God and he'll give back to you. And in a way, that is a little similar. But in the Reb Huna says, choosing a wife, you should consider all the signs, even a dog barking. And Reb Huna says, when a man goes to take a wife and he even hears a dog barking, he should listen to what they're saying. So for sure, consider signs and take them very carefully. But in the Midrash, Reb Yitzchak explains that there's certain people, and again, it's fun learning this Midrash because there are 4 instances when a person says, if this happens, then I'm going to do that. And it could have gone not such a good way. And Hashem intervened and it went in the right way. So let me tell you those 4 instances because it's interesting what they are. So there's a story with Kalev who says, whoever, and this is interesting because there's a town in Eretz Israel now called Kiryat Sefer. Whoever smites Kiryat Sefer, a city in Canaan that Kalev had sort of ownership over, whoever smites Kiryat Sefer and conquers it, it was later given to him, I'm sorry. Whoever smites Kiryat Sefer and conquers it, I shall give my daughter, Achash, as a wife. The Midrash says, what would have happened if a slave would have conquered Kiryat Sefer? What would have happened then? Would he have given his daughter to a slave? And when Eliezer was at the well, what would have happened if a slave girl would have come out or some not suitable girl would have come out? Well, Hashem was kind to both of them because he made the right person come out. But, you know, you've got to be careful with the kind of promises you're making. What about Shaul, King Shaul? It says the king will enrich whoever kills Goliath with great wealth and give his daughter to him to marry. Well, what happens if a Cushite or an idolater or a slave would have killed Goliath? Hashem was very kind and he made it that David killed Goliath, but that's a bit of a rash promise to make, says the Midrash. And then there was a person called Jephthah, and this is a very tricky one because he says he went out to battle and he says, Hashem, if you will deliver the children of Ammon into my hand, whoever comes out of the doors of my house towards me when I come back, if I come back successful from the children of Ammon, will belong to Hashem. I shall offer as an olah offering. Well, the Midrash wasn't impressed with this. A dog could have come out, a donkey could have come out. As it happened, his daughter came out. Wow. What is he going to do then? Offer her as a sacrifice? God forbid, right? So according to one opinion, because she was sort of, her father spoke in this way, she was celibate her whole life. She didn't get married, she didn't start a family. According to some other children, I don't even want to say, some other opinions, there are other opinions who said that he felt that he had to keep his promise in some way. And then you look inside and he could have gone and spoken to the head of the Sanhedrin. He could have had his vow annulled, but a whole complicated story. But Hashem didn't protect him from his like rash whoever, comes, Hashem actually didn't protect him and didn't send the right person. Okay, but in any event, Eliezer is relying on Hashem helping him, and Hashem actually does send the right girl, and who comes out, and so he says, let it be the maiden to whom I shall say, please tip your jug so I may drink. And he replies, drink and I'll water your camels. I'll know that through this you have done kindness. And he hadn't even finished speaking when suddenly Rivka, who had been born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, the brother of Abraham, was coming out with her jug upon her shoulder. Now that's HP, right? Beautiful synchronicity. He's davening to Hashem and he hasn't even finished speaking. And the girl who's the descendant, who's actually his Abraham's niece, comes out. And she was very pretty. She was a virgin. And she comes to the spring and she fills her jug. And it says that Hashem made a miracle for her, that when she came down to the water actually rose up to greet her. Pretty miraculous girl. The water even realizes she's special and it kind of comes up to greet her. And she descends to the spring and she fills her jug and she goes up, and the slave runs towards her and says, let me sip, please, a little water from your jug. And she said, drink, my lord. And she hurried and she lowered her jug to her hand and gave him to drink. When she finished giving him to drink, she said, I will draw water even for your camels until they have finished drinking. And so she hurried and she emptied her jug into the trough and kept running back and forth to the well to draw water, and she drew for all his camels. Well, that's a lot of water because camels drink a lot. And it says only when she went to the well to get water for Eliezer did the water rise up. But for the camels, each time she went and did it again and again and again, the water didn't rise up. She had to go down and get it. So that's a lot of water because 10 camels. She kept doing it. She kept doing it. She kept doing it. She kept doing it. And the man, that's Eliezer, he was very astonished. He's like, wow, this girl is really exceptionally kind. And he was wondering if, in fact, Hashem has made his journey successful or not. And it was when, and he hasn't spoken to her yet. He doesn't know from which family she is. It was when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a golden nose ring. Hang on, did she tell him already who she is? She didn't tell him yet. We know that she was from the family, but she didn't tell him yet. He gives her a golden nose ring. Its weight was a beka, 2 bracelets on her arms, 10 gold shekels their weight. And he says, then he gives her gifts, and then he says, from whose family are you? And then she says she's from the right family. Before we get to that, there's another little part about an angel again, because it says there's also an opinion that 2 angels went with him. One angel made it that Eliezer came to the well exactly at the right time, because another angel was at Rivka, encouraging Rivka, kind of like nudging Rivka, that exactly at the time when Rivka went out to take the camels, they had this synchronistic meeting, that exactly the time that Eliezer came to the well was exactly the time that Rivka came to the well. So that's beautiful synchronicity over there. And there's one other thing to bear in mind, is that how come Eliezer is praying that his mission will be successful? Why is he praying so hard? Abraham was a very well-known person, and he's coming with a document testifying that he's representing Yitzchak, who has all of Abraham's wealth. It's a lot of wealth. the Midrash says, why is he so worried that he's not going to be successful? He could be pretty confident that, Avram is a very famous guy. He's going to have success. So he says that he learned in Abraham's house to pray for success for everything. Even if you think that you guaranteed success, you still pray that Hashem should bless what you're doing at all times. You still pray. And of course, this fact that Rivka, who's the mother of the Jewish people, becomes the mother of the Jewish people. I mean, we know Sarah and Abraham were the first parents of the Jewish people. They had Yitzchak, but now Yitzchak, having this blessing from his father that Hagar was so insistent shouldn't go to Ishmael, Yitzchak is carrying that blessing of the DNA, the light of the Jewish people, and he's looking for the right woman to partner with him. And it's very fitting that it's a woman who's so kind that she goes back and back and back and gives to these 10 camels. And I remember learning from my friend Shimona that all that water that she's pouring out is wisdom. And the 10 camels referencing to 10 nations, all the other nations that somehow she's bestowing levels of wisdom. It's a big symbolic thing, not only to her kindness, but this capacity of her to be part of the Jewish people's gift and responsibility to kind of pour wisdom into the world, even into the physical world, even to the 10 camels that are representing 10 aspects of physicality in the world. So that's very beautiful. I want to just end reading a little bit about the symbolic meanings of these gifts that Eliezer gave to Rivka, a nose ring and 2 bracelets, and then we can just talk about whatever else we feel we can extract from the story. So the Maharal explains that in those first few moments when Eliezer realized that Hashem had indeed led him to the bride ordained for Yitzchak, there were profound messages that he had to convey to her immediately. Messages about the meaning of this union and the character of the Jewish people that would emerge from it. And even though Rivka's conscious mind could not assimilate these messages, yet her muzzle could. So she's a young girl, but he's sort of communicating with her symbolically. And by the way, when they do go back to her house and Eliezer meets the family and everything, and they kind of set up the shidduch, it's very interesting that even in that primitive culture, they say, we got to ask the girl, Rivka herself, does she want to, come with you and marry this Yitzchak persona, or doesn't she? She wasn't just schlepped away. She expressed her opinion, which is very interesting. But anyway, back to the gifts. So he hinted to her by giving her 3 pieces of jewelry, that she would be the mother of a nation, distinguished by 3 pillars upon which the world stands: Torah, Avoda, and Gimilot Chasadim. So learning Torah, prayer, and acts of loving kindness. The half a shekel symbolized service in the temple, Avoda. Why? Because of the mitzvah of shkalim, the half shekels donated by the Jewish people for the temple service. The 2 bracelets symbolize Torah and kindness, also maybe alluding to the 2 tablets, the 10 commandments, 1, the mitzvahs between man and man, 1, the mitzvahs between man and God. And he was telling her that since she already possessed 1 pillar, kindness, she would merit the other 2 as well. These 3 elements would be contained within the genes of the Jewish people, inasmuch as Avram was a paragon of kindness, Yitzchak was a symbol of avoda, which is giving yourself over to service, and Yaakov would be because we said he was always studying, he sat in his tents, he would be the one representing Torah study. So Eliezer was hinting to Rivka that she would be welcome and well placed in such a family, since she was such a wonderfully caring person herself. So moral of the story, if you're looking for a shidduch for your son, it's good to look for a kind person. And it is good, says Rab Huna, to pay attention to signs. And it is extra good if when you're going on a journey, you have a few malachim to accompany you. And all of us have guides, malachim, assistants, and we invited to look for the signs, look for where Hashem is guiding us. Sometimes certain things are very easy, and in a way, maybe that's like giving us an encouragement to go more in that direction. Sometimes other things we're trying to do are not that easy, and there's one problem after another. Maybe Hashem say, this is not really the direction you're meant to be going on. There's too many obstructions. Maybe then you have to like do what Susan says, kind of come back to the neutral and reevaluate. Should I be going left when everything I'm doing is met with resistance? Maybe I should try going right. Maybe it'll, open up easier. I'm not saying that that always works, but it is something to think about. And just this, watching this process of assistance, the blessing, the malachim, how it just works out. Somehow I thought it was a beautiful piece to focus in on. And then, of course, just to finish the story, so she gets all the water, she draws the water, the man is very excited, he's wondering, and then he gives her the nose ring, the bracelets, and then he says, is there room in your father's house for us to stay? And she says, I'm the daughter of Besul, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. And she said to him, even straw, even feed is plentiful with us. There's lots of place to stay. So he bows down and he says, God of my master Avram, who has not withheld his kindness and truth from my master, as for me, Hashem has guided me on the way to the house from the whole of Transjordan. Hashem guided him that he found his way right at his brother's house. And then the girl runs to her mother's house. She says all these words. She had a brother whose name was Lavan. Lavan ran outside and he saw the ring and the bracelets already on his sister's hands. So he kind of realizes this guy probably has, comes with some money. And then he says, come. And he says, come, why should you stand outside? I've cleared the house. I've taken out all the idols from the house. You can come in. There's place for you. We'll take care of your camels. And he comes in and they give the camels more food and water, and they wash the feet and they give them food. And he says, I have to speak. And then he tells him the whole thing. I've come, I'm representing my master. My Sarah, my master's wife, had a son, even though she was old, and he's given them all his wealth, and he made me promise that I should come here. And he tells the whole long story again, that I should come back to his family and take a wife. And then I said, maybe she won't come with me. And then again, Hashem, before whom I've walked, Avram said to me, he'll send an angel with you and make your journey successful. Don't worry. You'll find a wife for my son from my family. Everything will be fine. And then he said, I came today and I was standing at the spring. He tells the whole story again. And then he says, there's this young woman, etc., etc. She came out and all of that. And then they say, Lavan and Besul, Lavan's the brother and Besul's the father. And they said, the matter is definitely from Hashem. We're unable to say to you good or bad. And that's a great, I know I'm going over time, just stay here for 1 minute, Linda. Oh, okay, Linda's left. This thing of, we always like to say things are good or bad. And it's very interesting that Lavan and Besul say, it's from Hashem. There's no good or bad here. For sure it's decreed. And then they say, we can't speak here. Rebecca is before you, and she will speak for herself. And let's just see. And then let us call the maiden and ask her. And they called Rivka and said, will you go? And she said, I will go. And that's the story I wanted to talk with you about, the shidduch. And I thought it was kind of cool to see those midrashim. And any comments, questions, responses, anything that you would like to share? If not, I'll say good night. If yes, no.
Yeah, just another shout out about the weekend. It was absolutely awesome. It has had a lasting effect. I so appreciate it. So grateful. Keep teaching. Keep your light on.
Keep my lights on. Okay, isn't that something about Motel 6? I'll keep the light on.
Right. You're a better quality than Motel 6.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. And
So I'm gonna second that. I'm gonna second that. This, had such a lasting effect and ripple effect for all week. That great weekend. And about it was perfect timing for me. And I'm just gonna quickly say, when you said about doing things and how do we get the feeling that Hashem is with us on our grocery shopping, and I just had a very interesting story about it right before I came on to this meeting. I'm doing a Shabbaton this week for my grandchildren. I'm teaching them how to knit. I have a Bobby's knitting class, it's called, and I always promise them that I'm going to do a knitting Shabbaton. So this week is the week. So it's 4 big girls, and they're my 4 big ones, and they're coming. Everybody's excited. So I have 2 nieces that live in Borough Park, and my grandchildren are very close to these 2 nieces. And just before, one of my grandchildren called me and say, "Ma, Bobby, you have to call Miriam and Razy from Borough Park. They have to join our Shabbaton. They have to." And I'm like, okay, makes it 6 girls instead of 4. It's more of starting to be like a kindergarten. And then I said that Miriam and Razy's mother, they don't really go anywhere. They're not goers. So I'm thinking yes, no. And then I said, Miriam, just put it out there. The kids want it. It's another 2 kids. Just invite them. So I send a WhatsApp to invite them. About 10 minutes later, their mother calls me and she says, I can't believe what just happened. We're going away for a Shabbos job. He's a mishgiach. They're going away for a Shabbos job. And she was just thinking that she doesn't want to take the girls along, but where should they stay? She didn't know where they're going to stay.
wow.
And as I'm thinking about this, they get an invitation from you to join your Shabbaton.
Wow.
So I was like, when things like that happen, I definitely believe Hashem is here in my Shabbaton. It was just like a little signal.
By the way, I want to introduce, this is Miriam Glauber. She came to the Shabbaton. I didn't know her before the Shabbaton, but now we know each other, Baruch Hashem. So if anybody wasn't on the Shabbos, this is Miriam. She's joining the class.
Hi,
Yes.
Miriam.
Nice to meet everyone. So that was one thing I wanted to share. And the next one is about Chaya Sarah, is about a shidduch. And I desperately need a shidduch for my son, who just turned 21, a beautiful boy. And I'm just listening to everything you say and trying to see the signs where I'm going to go find a girl for my son. Okay, so am I going to take the camels? Am I going to ask the girl to bring me water? What are the signs?
Well,
Should I go out and buy the bracelet already? Maybe I should go out this week and just get the bracelet first. Have it in the house. What are the, I really need a shidduch for my son. He's 21, Hasidish, ready to go. And it's shidduch week. It's the parsha is about shidduchim.
Right. Well, I'll give
That's
you
what
that you should be matzliach, and Hashem should make it easy for you, and you should get good inspiration to make the right moves, and then you should recognize when the right things come your way.
Amen. And I hope B'Karev I'm gonna come with the good news.
Amen.
I didn't focus on the psukim, but it says that Eliezer davened to Hashem that he should make his mission successful. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a question before you hang up?
Yes, sure.
So listen, so I asked somebody about this before, the whole thing with the nose ring. It's like acceptable in those times, but it's not acceptable now. And a Jewish person would be like,
It's not necessarily true. They're different. There's different communities where there's some communities, maybe more Sephardi communities. There are communities where it is.
oh,
Some
I'm
people
sorry.
feel like it's acceptable to wear a nose ring. It's not so
Wait,
acceptable.
wait. Can you repeat that? Just because
Okay,
I'm sorry, I can't, I'm leaving, I have to leave work. I can't wait to my car. No, but you know the nose rings I'm talking about?
yes,
Like,
and I'm telling you,
amongst Jewish women in America, like
I
some
mean,
women, like nobody would
Mons-
approve of.
in Muncie, there's different customs than there would be in some Sephardi neighborhood in Eretz Israel. I know some very frum person who was living in Israel for a while and felt like she wants to put in a nose. It's not really a ring, but it's kind of a nose stud. I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's a minhag hamakom kind of thing. Like in some communities, it's not regarded as being appropriate, and in other communities, maybe it's
really?
regarded differently. If it was done in the Torah, it can't be an asur thing, but I think it's a minhag hamakom thing.
That's, so which Sephardi countries are you talking about that people
I think some
have studs?
Sephardi communities, I don't even know if they're countries. I'm saying that in Israel, in some Sephardi communities, maybe it's acceptable. I think in different other countries where Yidden have lived, in Arabic countries, I think maybe they've worn nose rings. It's definitely not a halachic thing that you're not allowed to do it.
No, I know it's not a halachic thing, but I just know that like in where we live in this country,
Well,
like
sir, I'm not
these,
advising you to get a nose ring. I don't think.
no,
you-
I'm not interested myself anyway, but
Yeah.
it just brings up a point. It's like culturally,
Yeah,
nobody would like,
I don't know about nobody. Most people in Muncie not, but I don't know if nobody.
no, I was gonna say nobody would approve of it. They wouldn't approve of a nose ring that the non-Jewish people wear.
Well, I'm
I'm not being argumentative. I'm just pointing out that it's like a very interesting thing. Like, oh, so ears, ears were always, ears are acceptable. I mean, I don't know if they had earrings.
I think these things change with the times, and because it's written in the Torah, it's obviously not asur, and I think it depends on
Sure.
communities and depends on time. But I don't want to talk about it anymore because I don't know enough about it, really.
Okay.
Any other comments? Otherwise, we'll say goodnight. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, about that, I don't really know, but things change. Like people wear different clothes in different times and
Exactly.
are appropriate at different.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah. Anyway, all right, everyone, have a good night and
good
thank
night,
you. for
Bracha.
joining. All right.
Great
Thank you.
Shabbos.
Thank
Good
you so much.
Shabbos to
Good night,
all.
everybody. Have a good week, everybody, too.
Bye,
Okay.
Gesund.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Bracha. Thank you.
Bye.